The ancient crystal spires of Altair Prime hummed with energy as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what many considered a routine matter. High above the twin suns, the Galactic Council's floating citadel housed beings from 847 different worlds, each species having earned their place through centuries of peaceful cooperation and technological advancement. Ambassador Thielen adjusted his ceremonial robes as he prepared to address the assembly. The Dracomori had served on the council for over 2 millennia, and in all that time he had never encountered a situation quite like this one. A new species had emerged from the Outer Rim territories, spreading across star systems with alarming speed and showing disturbing signs of aggressive expansion. The holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing crude metal ships with primitive propulsion systems. Their hulls bore the scars of countless battles, and their weapons were little more than explosive projectiles fired at high velocity. These vessels belonged to the species that called themselves humans, and they had become a problem that could no longer be ignored. "Fellow counselors," Thielen began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber through translation matrices, "we face a familiar challenge. A young species has discovered faster-than-light travel and believes this grants them dominion over whatever territory they can reach. Their expansion into contested sectors has disrupted trade routes and threatened the stability we have maintained for 3,000 years. The display shifted to show star charts marking human colonies. Red markers indicated worlds where humans had established settlements despite existing claims from other species. Yellow markers showed systems where human ships had been detected conducting what appeared to be military reconnaissance. The pattern was unmistakable and deeply troubling. Counselor Vash of the Kaleri delegation raised one of her 4 arms to speak. "These humans have made contact with 3 of our member species already. 2 of those encounters resulted in armed conflict. The third ended only when our ships withdrew rather than engage in what appeared to be a suicidal charge by the human vessels." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. For a species to survive first contact with council members and then actively seek further confrontation was unprecedented. Most civilizations recognized the futility of challenging beings who had mastered technologies beyond their comprehension. Thielen nodded gravely. "Indeed, our intelligence reports suggest that humans have been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history. They have developed their technology specifically for the purpose of killing other humans. This makes them uniquely dangerous among the species we have encountered." The hologram changed again, this time showing images captured from human settlements. The beings themselves were unremarkable bipeds with soft skin and minimal natural defenses. They appeared physically weak compared to most council species, lacking the armored hide of the Dracmori or the enhanced sensory organs of the Kalari. Yet somehow these fragile creatures had built weapons, capable of cracking moon-sized asteroids and ships that could survive direct impacts that would vaporize most vessels. "Their industrial capacity is primitive but extensive," Thielen continued. "They strip mine entire worlds to fuel their expansion, showing no regard for environmental preservation or sustainable development. Their ships are built for warfare first, with life support and crew comfort being secondary considerations at best." Elder Morath of the Zentari spoke from his position near the chamber's apex. His species had been among the founding members of the council, and his words carried enormous weight. "What do you propose, Ambassador Thielen?" "We cannot allow this disruption to continue, but we also cannot abandon our principles of peaceful resolution." Thielen had anticipated this question and had prepared his response carefully. "We follow the same protocol that has served us well for millennia. We present the humans with a clear choice: submit to council authority and withdraw from all disputed territories, or face the consequences of their defiance." The vote was swift and unanimous. Every species represented in the chamber had benefited from the council's protection and guidance. They had seen firsthand how technological superiority could bring even the most warlike species to heel. The humans would be no different. The ultimatum was drafted and precise: diplomatic language and transmitted through subspace channels to the human homeworld. The message was simple. Humanity had one standard galactic cycle to cease their aggressive expansion, withdraw from all contested systems, and accept council oversight of their future colonization efforts. Failure to comply would result in a demonstration of force that would make their position in the galactic hierarchy unmistakably clear. As the council session concluded, representatives began departing for their home systems, confident that the matter would resolve itself within days. The humans would undoubtedly attempt some form of negotiation, seeking better terms or requesting more time to comply. When that failed, they would submit to the inevitable. No species in recorded history had been foolish enough to challenge council authority twice. Phelan remained in the chamber long after the others had left, studying the tactical reports one final time. Something about the humans troubled him, though he could not articulate exactly what it was. Their ships were crude, their technology laughably primitive, and their society appeared to be constantly on the verge of self-destruction, yet they had survived contact with 3 council member species and emerged stronger from each encounter, the intelligence reports described. Human behavior that seemed almost incomprehensible to civilized minds. They would sacrifice entire fleets to achieve minor tactical advantages. They would colonize worlds that no sane species would consider habitable. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to view death in battle as something approaching an honor rather than a tragedy to be avoided, but such concerns were irrelevant now. The council had spoken, and the humans would comply or face the consequences. In his 2,000 years of service, Phelan had seen this scenario play out dozens of times. The outcome was always the same. The message reached Earth's communication arrays within hours, and the human response would determine whether this became another footnote in the Council's long history of successful diplomacy or something entirely unprecedented. Phelan was certain it would be the former, but deep in his mind, a small voice wondered what would happen if he was wrong about these strange, violent creatures from the galaxy's edge. President Maria Rodriguez had seen many crises during her 2 terms in office, but nothing had prepared her for the message that arrived at exactly 1400 hours on a Tuesday that would forever change human history. The alien transmission appeared simultaneously on every communication network across Earth, its meaning clear despite being delivered in 17 different human languages with perfect grammar and syntax. The Global Defense Coalition's emergency bunker beneath Geneva buzzed with activity as world leaders gathered through holographic projections from across the planet. Prime Minister Thompson from the European Federation, Chancellor Wang from the Pacific Alliance, and General Secretary Petrov from the Northern Union all wore expressions of grim determination as they absorbed the implications of the alien ultimatum. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the situation. "We are no longer alone in the universe, and apparently we are not welcome guests. The Galactic Council has given us 30 days to abandon our colonies and submit to their authority." Admiral Torres, Supreme Commander of the human colonial fleet, activated the strategic display showing Earth's 17 colony worlds scattered across 9 star systems. Each red dot represented millions of human lives, industrial facilities that had taken decades to construct, and resources that had cost tremendous effort to secure. The aliens were demanding humanity surrender everything they had built beyond Earth's atmosphere. Dr. Elizabeth Williams, director of the Emergency Research Division, had spent the last 6 hours analyzing the alien message's technical specifications. Her findings were both terrifying and illuminating. "Their transmission technology is centuries beyond our current capabilities," she reported. "They sent this message across interstellar distances in real time, something our best scientists say should be impossible. If their weapons are equally advanced, we're facing an enemy that could destroy our entire civilization without breaking stride." The silence that followed was broken by General Harrison, the old soldier who had commanded Earth's defense forces through 3 colonial wars. "With respect, Doctor, we've been fighting impossible odds since we first picked up sharp sticks and decided to hunt mammoth. The question isn't whether we can win a conventional war against these aliens. The question is whether we're going to lie down and let them walk over us without a fight. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The general's words echoed something fundamental in human nature that the aliens had clearly failed to understand. Throughout their history, humans had faced extinction countless times and survived through stubbornness, adaptability, and a refusal to accept defeat even when victory seemed impossible. Admiral Torres, Rodriguez said, what are our military capabilities compared to what the aliens demonstrated in their first contact encounters? Torres pulled up tactical reports from the 3 previous alien encounters. The data painted a sobering picture but also revealed important weaknesses. Their ships are technologically superior, but they seem designed for patrol duties rather than sustained combat operations. In each encounter, the aliens withdrew when faced with determined resistance, rather than pressing their advantage. Either they're extremely cautious or they lack experience with actual warfare. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours and involved every major world leader, military commander, and scientific advisor on Earth. Some argued for negotiation, hoping to find a compromise that would allow humanity to maintain at least some colonial presence. Others pushed for immediate surrender, believing that any resistance would only make their eventual subjugation more brutal, but the majority reached a different conclusion, one that surprised nobody who understood human history. Earth would not submit to alien demands, not abandon their colonies, and not accept a subordinate position in some galactic hierarchy they had never agreed to join. If the aliens wanted to control human space, they would have to fight for every inch of it. The response began immediately. Every ship in the colonial fleet received orders to return to their home systems and begin defensive preparations. Civilian vessels were commandeered and converted into supply transports. Mining operations in the asteroid belts shifted from extracting materials for colonial expansion to producing raw materials for weapons. Manufacturing. Dr. Williams launched crash programs to reverse engineer the limited alien technology humans had recovered from previous encounters. What they lacked in understanding, they would compensate for with quantity and innovation. Human engineers had always excelled at taking advanced concepts and finding ways to build them with primitive materials and brute force engineering. The industrial mobilization that followed dwarfed anything in human history. Factories that had been producing consumer goods retooled overnight to manufacture weapons, ammunition, and ship components. University research labs abandoned their civilian projects to focus on military applications. Even entertainment industries began producing propaganda materials to maintain civilian morale during what everyone knew would be a long and costly war. President Rodriguez addressed the world 72 hours after receiving the alien ultimatum. Her message was broadcast to every human settlement, from the sprawling cities of Earth to the frontier mining stations on the edge of human space. The words were simple but carried the weight of species survival. To the Galactic Council and anyone else listening, she said, looking directly into the camera with steel in her eyes, humanity rejects your ultimatum. We did not ask for your permission to leave our homeworld, and we do not require your approval to exist. Our colonies will not be abandoned, our people will not be relocated, and our sovereignty will not be surrendered. If you want to control human space, come and take it. But understand that you are not dealing with a species that has forgotten how to fight. We have been preparing for this war our entire history, even if we did not know who our enemy would be. The alien response came within days, exactly as human strategists had predicted. A small fleet of 12 vessels entered the solar system, their intentions clearly hostile. They had expected to find a cowering species ready to beg for mercy. Instead, they found a trap that had been centuries in the making, built by beings who understood that peace was only possible when backed by the absolute resolve to wage war. The real conflict was about to begin, and humanity intended to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The Drakmori battlecruiser Eternal Wisdom dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system with the casual confidence of a species that had never known defeat. Behind it, 11 other vessels from the Council's patrol fleets formed. a loose formation designed more for impressive display than tactical effectiveness. They had come to deliver a lesson in humility to an upstart species. Nothing more. Fleet Commander Morvith studied the scanner readings from his command throne, expecting to see the scattered remnants of human defenses and perhaps a few desperate messages begging for mercy. Instead, his tactical displays showed something that made no sense according to every intelligence report the Council had compiled about human capabilities. The inner system bristled with defensive installations that had not existed during the Council's previous reconnaissance missions. Massive orbital platforms surrounded Earth like a metal shell, their weapons arrays trained outward toward the approaching Council fleet. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a maze of fortified positions, each one designed to channel attacking forces into predetermined killing zones. "Commander," his tactical officer reported with barely concealed confusion, "we are detecting over 300 separate defensive positions throughout the system. Long-range scanners indicate significant military infrastructure on every major moon and asteroid. This level of construction should have taken years to complete, but our last surveillance mission was only 6 months ago." Morvith nodded thoughtfully. The humans had clearly been preparing for this confrontation longer than the Council had realized. Their primitive industrial capacity had somehow produced fortifications that would have challenged a much larger invasion force. Still, 12 Council vessels represented overwhelming technological superiority against any defensive network built with human technology. "Open communications with the human leadership," Morvith ordered. "Inform them that the Galactic Council is prepared to demonstrate our resolve. They have one final opportunity to surrender before we begin targeted strikes against their orbital installations." The response came not in words but in action that violated every principle of civilized warfare the Council had established over millennia. Without warning, without negotiation, without even a formal declaration of hostilities, the humans opened fire with everything they had built. The first wave consisted of kinetic projectiles, launched from positions throughout the asteroid belt. These were not sophisticated guided missiles but simple chunks of metal, accelerated to enormous velocities by electromagnetic launchers. The Council's defensive systems were designed to stop energy weapons and guided ordnance, not clouds of high-speed debris that filled space like deadly rain. 3 Council ships took immediate damage as their shields overloaded under the impact of hundreds of projectiles. The elegant energy barriers that had protected them in countless police actions flickered and failed under the brutal efficiency of human engineering. Morvith watched in disbelief as the escort destroyer Harmonies light simply disintegrated under a concentrated barrage of what amounted to space-launched artillery shells. "Return fire," Morvith commanded, his voice tight with shock. "Target their orbital platforms with precision strikes. We need to demonstrate our technological superiority without causing unnecessary casualties." The Council's energy weapons lanced out toward the nearest human fortifications, their focused beams designed to disable rather than destroy. But the humans had not built their defenses according to any civilized standard of warfare. Instead of surrendering when faced with superior firepower, the orbital platforms continued firing even as they were torn apart by alien beam weapons. What followed challenged every assumption the Council held about rational military behavior. Human defenders fought to the death in positions that could not possibly be saved. Damaged platforms used their final moments of operation to launch suicide attacks against Council vessels. Even civilian ships joined the battle, ramming Council escorts with their own hulls in desperate attempts to inflict damage. The second wave of human attacks came from directions the Council had not anticipated. Small fighter craft emerged from concealment among the system's outer planets, their pilots apparently willing to engage vessels hundreds of times larger than their own ships. These fighters carried nuclear warheads instead of conventional weapons, and their pilots showed no hesitation about detonating them at point-blank range. Commander Morvith found himself fighting a battle unlike anything in Council military doctrine. The humans did not retreat when outgunned, did not negotiate when facing superior technology, and did not surrender when their positions became hopeless. Instead, they fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, treating every engagement as if the survival of their entire species depended on the outcome. The destroyer Peaceful Dawn exploded in a brilliant flash as 3 human fighters penetrated its defensive screen and detonated their nuclear payload simultaneously. The cruiser Diplomatic Solution listed badly to starboard as kinetic projectiles punched through its hull, venting atmosphere and crew into the void. Across the battle zone, Council vessels found themselves engaged in desperate close quarters combat with an enemy that seemed to consider mutual destruction an acceptable tactical outcome. "Sir," the communications officer reported with panic creeping into his voice, "the humans are not responding to any surrender offers or ceasefire proposals. They appear to be fighting to total destruction regardless of casualties." Morvith realized with growing horror that the Council had made a fundamental error in their assessment of human psychology. These beings did not fight for territorial gain or political advantage. They fought for survival itself, and a species fighting for survival followed no rules of civilized warfare. The final straw came when human forces began using their own damaged ships as weapons. A crippled human cruiser, its engines disabled, and life support failing, changed course directly toward the Eternal Wisdom. Its crew had apparently decided to ram the Council flagship rather than accept defeat. "All vessels," Morvith transmitted across the fleet communication network, "immediate withdrawal to safe distance. Prepare for emergency hyperspace jump on my command." The retreat was accomplished with as much dignity as possible under the circumstances, but there was no disguising the reality of what had occurred. The mighty Galactic Council, masters of 800 worlds and keepers of galactic peace for 3 millennia, had been driven from battle by a species they had dismissed as primitive and barbaric. As the surviving Council ships limped away from Earth's solar system, Morvith composed his after-action report with a sense of dawning dread. The humans had revealed something that the galaxy had forgotten existed. A species that understood warfare not as an extension of diplomacy, but as a fundamental aspect of survival itself. The Council had sent 12 ships to deliver a lesson in humility. Instead, they had learned something far more disturbing about the price of awakening a sleeping giant. The real war was just beginning, and the humans had already proven they would not fight according to anyone else's rules. The massive Council armada that assembled at the staging point near Proxima Centauri represented the largest military force deployed in over 800 years. 300 vessels from 12 different member species had been pulled from patrol duties across the galaxy, their combined firepower sufficient to reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust. Elder Corvash, Supreme Military Coordinator for the Council, surveyed the fleet from his flagship with grim satisfaction. The humans had humiliated a Council patrol force through trickery and savage tactics that no civilized species would employ. Such behavior could not be allowed to stand, lest other primitive worlds begin to question the natural order that had brought peace to the galaxy. This demonstration would be swift, decisive, and overwhelming enough to discourage any future acts of defiance. Intelligence reports indicated that Earth's solar system had been largely evacuated following the first engagement. Human civilian populations had apparently fled to their outer colonies, abandoning their homeworld rather than face the inevitable consequences of their rebellion. Corvash approved of this decision, as it would minimize unnecessary casualties. When the Council made its final demonstration of superior power, the Armada entered hyperspace in perfect formation, their destination coordinates locked onto Earth's star system. The journey would take 3 standard days, during which Corvash planned to compose a formal surrender document that would serve as a template for future dealings with upstart species. The humans would be allowed to survive, but only under strict Council supervision that would prevent any repeat of their recent barbarism. When the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at Earth's outer system boundary, the tactical displays showed exactly what Corvash had expected to find. The orbital fortifications that had briefly delayed the patrol force were gone, reduced to debris fields that glittered in the light of Sol. The asteroid belt showed signs of extensive mining activity, but no active defensive installations. Even Earth's moon appeared to have been abandoned, its surface installations dark and lifeless. "Begin standard occupation formation," Corvash commanded. "Deploy screening forces to secure the outer planets while the main fleet advances on Earth itself. Maintain scanner sweeps for any remaining human vessels, but expect minimal resistance." The advance proceeded smoothly for the first 6 hours. Council forces secured the outer system methodically, their sensors detecting only scattered debris and abandoned installations. It appeared that the humans had finally grasped the futility of resistance and withdrawn to whatever remote colonies might still shelter them. Then the trap revealed itself with the devastating efficiency that had become humanity's signature in warfare. The first attacks came from directions that violated every principle of tactical doctrine the Council understood. What had appeared to be normal asteroids suddenly revealed themselves as camouflaged weapons platforms, their surfaces opening to disgorge swarms of guided missiles that locked onto the nearest Council vessels. The humans had not evacuated their defensive positions. They had simply made them invisible. Corvash watched in stunned amazement as his tactical display filled with thousands of missile contacts emerging from concealment throughout the system. These were not the crude kinetic projectiles that had damaged the patrol force, but sophisticated guided weapons that used quantum entanglement for targeting and carried warheads that produced miniature stellar explosions on impact. "How is this possible?" he demanded. Our intelligence indicated that human technology was centuries behind our own capabilities. His chief science officer provided the answer that chilled Corvash to his core. "Sir, analysis of the enemy weapons indicates they are using modified Council technology. They appear to have reverse-engineered our own systems and adapted them for offensive rather than defensive applications." The implications were staggering. In the 6 months since their first encounter with Council forces, the humans had not only studied captured alien technology, but found ways to improve upon it using their primitive industrial base. What they lacked in theoretical understanding, they compensated for through brute force engineering and a willingness to push every system far beyond its designed operational parameters. The second wave of attacks revealed even more disturbing innovations in human warfare. Ships that had appeared to be derelict suddenly powered up and began moving under their own power. But instead of traditional propulsion systems, they used controlled fusion detonations for thrust. These vessels moved with impossible speed and agility, their crews apparently willing to endure acceleration forces that would kill most other species. But it was the human fighters that truly demonstrated the aliens' fundamental misunderstanding of their enemy. These small craft operated in ways that defied all logic, their pilots treating death as an acceptable outcome rather than something to be avoided at all costs. They would ram Council vessels without hesitation, detonate their own ships if it meant damaging enemy targets, and continue fighting even when their life support systems had failed. Admiral Torres coordinated the human defense from a command vessel that moved constantly throughout the system, never staying in one location long enough for Council forces to target it effectively. Her strategy was simple and brutally effective: make every Council victory cost more than the aliens were willing to pay. The humans had learned from their first encounter and adapted their tactics accordingly. Instead of trying to match Council technology directly, they used overwhelming numbers and unorthodox methods that exploited weaknesses in alien doctrine. Where the Council expected defensive positions, they found mobile strike forces. Where they anticipated negotiation, they received unrelenting aggression. Corvash found his mighty armada being picked apart, piece by an enemy that refused to follow any recognizable pattern of civilized warfare. Human forces would appear from impossible directions, strike with devastating effect, and vanish before Council weapons could respond. They turned debris fields into weapon clouds, used their own damaged ships as guided missiles, and seemed to consider mutual destruction a viable tactical option. The breaking point came when human forces began targeting Council supply lines and support vessels rather than engaging the main battle fleet directly. Suddenly, the armada found itself cut off from reinforcement and resupply, forced to fight with whatever resources they had brought to the battle. The humans, meanwhile, appeared to have unlimited reserves of ships, weapons, and most importantly, pilots willing to die for their cause. "Sir," the tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "we have lost 67 vessels and taken significant damage to 43 others. The humans appear to be replacing their losses faster than we can inflict them, and their attack patterns are becoming more sophisticated with each engagement." Corvash stared at the tactical display showing the remnants of what had been the most powerful military force in galactic history. The humans had not simply defeated the Council Armada, they had systematically dismantled it using tactics that no civilized species would consider acceptable. These beings did not wage war, they practiced mutual annihilation on an industrial scale. The order to withdraw came not from military necessity, but from the horrifying realization that the humans were learning from every engagement. Each Council ship destroyed provided them with more technology to reverse engineer, more tactical data to analyze, and more proof that their savage approach to warfare was effective against supposedly superior civilizations. As the surviving Council forces retreated toward the edge of human space, they left behind more than just wrecked ships and dead crew members. They had lost something far more precious, the illusion of invincibility that had maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years. The humans had proven that advanced technology meant nothing against enemies who refused to accept defeat, and that lesson would spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos rather than the dignified ceremony that had marked their meetings for millennia. Representatives from member worlds demanded answers, explanations, and most urgently, protection from the human forces that now raided Council territory with apparent impunity. The crystal chambers of Altair Prime echoed with voices raised in panic and anger as the greatest civilization in the galaxy grappled with an enemy unlike any they had encountered. Ambassador Thielen stood before the assembly with his ceremonial robes torn and stained from his narrow escape from a human attack on the Rigel supply depot. The beings he had dismissed as primitive barbarians 6 months ago had somehow destroyed a Council armada and were now striking at targets throughout civilized space. Their ships appeared without warning, inflicted maximum damage, and vanished before Council forces could respond. "The situation has escalated beyond our most pessimistic projections," Thielen announced to the assembled delegates. "Human raiding forces have struck 17 Council installations in the past month alone. They are not seeking to capture territory or resources. They are systematically destroying our ability to wage war while preserving their own military capacity." The tactical displays showed the scope of human operations across a dozen star systems. Red markers indicated successful attacks on shipyards, supply depots, communication relays, and research facilities. Yellow markers showed systems where human forces had been detected but had withdrawn before Council reinforcements could arrive. The pattern revealed a level of strategic thinking that challenged every assumption about primitive species. Counselor Vash raised her arm to speak, her voice trembling with barely controlled fear. "These humans have violated every law of civilized warfare. They target civilian infrastructure, use suicide attacks as standard tactics, and show no interest in negotiation or compromise. How do we fight an enemy that treats death as victory?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. For 3,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through the threat of overwhelming retaliation against any species that challenged their authority. But the humans had called that bluff and proven it empty against enemies who refused to be intimidated by superior technology or impossible odds. Dr. Kreneth, chief analyst for Council intelligence, presented findings that made the situation even more desperate. "Our captured human prisoners have provided disturbing insights into their psychological profile," she reported. "They do not view this conflict as a war in any sense we understand. To them, this is species survival, and they have mobilized their entire civilization accordingly." Every human colony has been converted into a military base. Every civilian ship has been armed for combat, and every citizen has been trained for warfare. The implications were staggering. The Council was fighting not just the human military, but the entire human species organized as a single weapon system. Their industrial capacity had been redirected toward producing instruments of war. Their scientific research focused on developing new methods of destruction, and their cultural resources devoted to maintaining morale during what they clearly expected to be a prolonged campaign of mutual annihilation. Elder Moref spoke from his position at the chamber's apex, his ancient voice carrying across the assembly with the weight of accumulated centuries. We face a species that has weaponized desperation itself. They do not fight for conquest or political advantage. They fight for the right to exist as free beings. Such enemies cannot be defeated through conventional military action because they have already accepted the cost of total destruction. The debate that followed revealed the depth of the crisis facing galactic civilization. Some delegates argued for massive escalation, proposing to mobilize the combined fleets of all member worlds for a final campaign that would exterminate humanity entirely. Others pushed for immediate negotiation, hoping to find some compromise that would end the conflict before it spread to other systems. But the humans had already made their position clear through actions rather than words. They were not interested in surrender, compromise, or negotiation from a position of weakness. Every council attempt at communication had been answered with increased raids, more sophisticated attacks, and clear evidence that human military capacity was expanding rather than diminishing despite their losses. President Rodriguez received the Council's first official request for negotiations through the same communication channels that had delivered their ultimatum 6 months earlier. The message was carefully worded to avoid any suggestion of Council weakness, but its meaning was unmistakable. The galaxy's supreme authority was asking for terms, rather than dictating them. The human response came not from Rodriguez but from Admiral Torres, whose mobile command had become the de facto center of human military operations. Her message was broadcast on all frequencies and translated into every council language simultaneously, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear humanity's terms clearly. To the Galactic Council and all who serve under their authority, Torres began, her image appearing on screens throughout civilized space. Humanity is prepared to discuss ending hostilities, but only as equals negotiating from positions of mutual respect. We will not withdraw from our colonies, we will not submit to external authority, and we will not accept a subordinate role in any galactic hierarchy we did not choose to join. The terms were simple but revolutionary. Humanity demanded recognition as a sovereign power with full territorial rights, representation in galactic government proportional to their population and resources, and guarantees that no council member would be permitted to interfere with human expansion into unclaimed systems. The signing of the Terran Accords took place not in the crystal chambers of Altair Prime, but on a neutral station in the void between council and human space. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, attended by representatives who understood they were witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Ambassador Thielen approached President Rodriguez with a question that had haunted him throughout the negotiations. How did you know we would never follow through on our threat to destroy Earth? Our intelligence indicated overwhelming military superiority. Rodriguez smiled with the cold satisfaction of someone who had gambled everything on a single insight and won. Because you had maintained peace for 3,000 years through the threat of force, not the application of it. You had forgotten how to wage actual war, while we have never forgotten how to fight for survival. The moment you hesitated to use maximum force, you proved that your threats were empty against enemies willing to pay any price for victory. The new galactic order that emerged from the Terran Accords was fundamentally different from the Council's ancient hegemony. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy contained multiple power centers, each capable of defending itself against aggression from others. The age of enforced peace through superior technology had ended, replaced by a more volatile but ultimately more honest balance of power. In the years that followed, Other species began to question their own subordinate status within Council territory. The humans had proven that advanced civilizations were not invincible, that primitive species could adapt and overcome through determination and innovation. The galaxy would never again know the comfortable certainty of unchallenged authority. The Council had sought to humble a young species and instead awaken something that had been sleeping in the depths of space for eons, the understanding that freedom, to have meaning, must be defended with absolute resolve against all who would take it away.